A sneak peek at what's coming up next.
If you find yourself in a situation where everybody is disagreeing with you and telling you you're wrong, perhaps you should consider that you might be wrong. So what do you tell a Trump supporter? And you have a conversation with them about January 6th and Trump trying to overthrow the democratic process. It's called the Eastman Memo, which was a plan from his administration laid out as to how he would try to steal the election. Did you know that exists? And most of them probably haven't heard of it or have not read it.
When does it go too far? I think we as a society have gone too far already with being skeptical, because it comes down to the point of everybody immediately, when somebody says something, they immediately say, prove it. I really dislike this whole, everybody's got to be the smartest person in the fucking room.
A lot of conservatives were talking about that woman in the Olympics, the boxing, Imane Khelif. People were saying, oh, she's a man, or saying she was trans and all this stuff. First of all, you don't know this person. Second of all, what you're saying is not even true, because you don't understand how chromosomes work. So if you don't have that prerequisite information, now you're just saying bullshit. And you're saying something that is actually hurtful to somebody. You need to be able to question yourself, admit when you're wrong, and also just keep in mind that you could be wrong. Because everyone who's online on Twitter and saying, well, it's a man fighting a woman. Well, it's not really that simple. First of all, they're not a man. Well, it can be kind of annoying sometimes. The essential oils Karen, who yes, Karen, medical science is wrong. But you're right. You and your peppermint oils, not the guy who went to med school for 10 years. You know what I mean? Are you ready?
Yeah, I was just giving it a second to get a quiet moment so I could say it.
Welcome to a wonderful episode of On the Spectrum. My name is Serge.
Serge?
Last name Protector.
Serge Protector.
And this is Nick Anderson. And we're the Electric Bunch.
The Electric Bunch.
Yeah.
But you get a cool name like Surge Protector, and I get Nick Anderson.
He is Cap Assiter. Captain Assiter.
Yeah.
And I am Surge Protector. The electric duo.
We have amazing powers of electricity.
So I know I'm kind of blindsiding you.
For this episode.
Yeah.
And possibly future ones.
But
let's take it.
So I had a couple different things I wanted to touch on, but one thing is skepticism.
Skepticism. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very common for people nowadays to be a skeptic, and I think it's good to have a certain level of healthy skepticism. But when does being skeptic become too much? When are people overdoing it with skepticism?
I was just thinking exactly that. Yes, people are becoming more skeptical, and I don't know if skeptical is the right word, maybe even just more cynical, and it looks like skepticism. But when does it go too far? I think we as a society have gone too far already with being skeptical, because it comes down to the point of everybody immediately, when somebody says something, they immediately say, prove it.
I have a good example.
Great.
That's so here's an example of unhealthy skepticism.
Okay.
If you talk to somebody who's a big Trump supporter, a big Trump fan, and they believe that the 2020 election was stolen, or they believe that the election was rigged, right? A lot of the people who believe that will have a million different excuses. So if you say, well, we couldn't find any evidence of voter fraud, or we couldn't find this, we couldn't find that, they will have a bunch of excuses about how, well, we can't trust this, we can't trust that, we can't trust this. So, okay, so you're telling me you can't trust any of the federal institutions that exist. You can't trust the CIA, you can't trust the FBI. Apparently, we can't trust the Secret Service because there's a bunch of conspiracies about him, that it was on purpose. That I was like, that malfeasance is a thing. That people make mistakes, right? People fuck up. People are lazy. People make boo-boos. It doesn't mean that there's some conspiracy or ill intention there. So at some point, what are you even doing if you have no trust in any government systems at all? I have a certain level of skepticism for people who have positions of power, but we have to trust, at least we have to have some base level of trust in our systems.
is it trust that we have to have, or is it faith?
No, I think we have to have some level of base trust. Like the judicial system, we know is not perfect and they make mistakes.
Right. But to me, we have to have faith that not all players at all times are doing things with ill intention or malice. I think we have to have a little bit of faith in people. When it comes to, like, did the Secret Service purposely plot and conspiracy to do ill to President Trump, former President Trump? Do I think every time somebody makes a verbal mistake like that, should we jump on them as if they are the worst person on the planet or horribly stupid? I think it comes down to that, like, micro of that, of when somebody miswords something, instead of in, I guess the popular term right now is, instead of in good faith thinking that they might mean more than what they do, people automatically jump on that miswordedness and they immediately think the person's an idiot, moron. They immediately take them on the worst case scenario of what they just said.
If you find yourself in a situation where everybody is disagreeing with you and telling you you're wrong, perhaps you should consider that you might be wrong, because it's more likely if everyone's telling you you're wrong and you have some sort of weird or crazy explanation for something. At that point, I don't know if your skepticism might be leading you down the wrong path, because it's not likely that, you know, if 30 people are disagreeing with you and telling you that you're wrong, especially in the context, let's assume that these people actually know something about what they're talking about. It's just some random person.
Right.
Well, what's more likely, that there's some vast conspiracy about something, or that you're just wrong?
So I don't want to make it that simple, because, you know, I don't like it when things get that simple of a this or that. But at one point in history, the vast majority of people thought the world was flat. The earth was flat.
When?
The vast majority. What do you mean when?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually
a few hundred years ago?
That's a misconception.
Okay. So you're telling me that there wasn't a large majority of people who believed the world was flat at one point?
Maybe at some point, but not.
Okay.
There's actually
let's go.
There's a historical misconception that, like, people during the Middle Ages or whatever thought that the world was flat, but that's not true. They knew the world was round since since ancient Greece. They've known the world was round.
So you're telling me the majority of people on the planet knew the Greeks, knew the work of said Greeks, and they all.
No, I think your average person didn't know if the world was flat or round. They probably just didn't care. I'm saying, but
probably did.
But we don't have a lot of information about those people. The information we have is from the intellectuals and the people who actually wrote stuff down.
Right, but those people, like, kind of my argument against William of Ockham, majority of the intellectuals weren't talking to majority of the...
Right, so we don't know what the random people thought. So I would say they probably didn't think about it. And
but we don't have evidence to support that, though.
We don't have...
We actually don't have evidence to support either one of our sides.
I'm saying that people who actually have information about did not believe that. I can't speak on the people that we don't have information about.
But then how did we know that there were people at all who believed the world was flat? Because we know at one point that people believed that.
We don't. That's the thing I'm telling you. It's a weird, like, it's one of those things that people say all the time that's not true. It's just that it's misconception.
But we do know that some people had that belief.
I don't know of anybody.
Just because you don't know of it doesn't mean it's not true.
I'm saying that, like, it would be hard for you to find, like, a list of people who actually believe. I'm saying that when you look at, if you want to talk about explorers and people who went around sailing around, because this is mostly in the context.
Hung up on this idea.
The only context that this really matters from a historical standpoint is people who are exploring. Because if you just live in a village in France, you don't give a fuck about if the world is flat around, because all you're doing is farming.
Yeah.
So I'm saying they probably didn't think about that stuff.
So I'm
talking about the people who actually thought about that stuff and cared would have been scientists or pseudoscience, like, at the time. The people who, like, the people who actually figured out that the world was round, as far as we know, because there could have been somebody else.
Right.
Like, but recorded history are the Greek mathematicians figured out that the world was round.
Or they believed the world was round. I wouldn't say figured it out. I'd say
they couldn't fly up in a plane and see it, but I'm saying they calculated it by using math, they figured out that it was round.
So the guesstimated with
Like we know that gravity, we can't see gravity, but we know its impact.
well, but
You can
people
measure the world being round without seeing that it's round.
I wouldn't. Well, I'm not saying definitely you have to see that it's round, but like even with math, though, they had to make certain assumptions or educated guesses to get them.
They were
there.
pretty close. I don't remember what the exact measurement. I don't but I know that they were relatively close to the actual circumference of the Earth.
And that's great. But there had to have been some estimated guesses on some of that.
Yeah, they did, but even with because they didn't have the most accurate of information,
Right.
but with the information they had, they were pretty close to inaccurate.
And that's great because they were smart folks. They knew math really well, but it was still an educated guess. They didn't actually know.
No, I think you're making a mistake here because your calculation can be off, but it doesn't mean that the formula is wrong, right?
Right, and I agree.
So you can say the world is round. What they would be off on is the diameter and the circumference of the Earth. So let's say their measurement might be off, but the fact that it's round, that's not off.
Okay, so that's fine and all, but they had to even decide.
Actually, I think part of the reason why they thought that it might be round, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure part of it was because they looked in the sky and they saw the moon, they saw other bodies
that are round,
and they're like, well, it would make sense that the Earth's round too.
So that right there, though, is still an educated guess, right? And to even build the formula.
Well, that's why they use math to figure out.
Hold on, but even to have the idea to use math to do it, to build a formula to figure that out, they had to initially go, this might be a thing. And like to me, though, that's kind of
isn't that how science starts?
Yes,
you come up with a hypothesis and then you test it.
Test a theory.
Yeah, they tested it and they said, well, mathematically it makes sense the Earth's round.
Okay, but I will say though, even if something makes sense mathematically, it doesn't 100% make it true. Like somebody once told me,
but if the Earth was flat, then the calculations wouldn't have worked at all.
Yeah, ultimately it wouldn't have worked at all, but it did end up working out.
Yeah.
So somebody once told me you can come up with a math theory to prove anything, whether it's actually true or not. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know.
I think you'd have to do some bullshit math.
Yes, I think you should. I think you would have
to.
But
like, I don't know how you would fake that the Earth is round unless you like. Okay.
So here's what I'll say. And this is, I don't know if this is 100% true.
Are you a flat earther?
Not yet. Apparently not yet. All right. That was, I mean, we got fixated on this fucking math idea. I was actually going to say, then why has the idea of flat earth perpetuated, even though we have evidence to support it? It's because it started from somewhere. Somebody had to come up with some bullshit theory. But anyway, here's what I'm going to say. And this is not necessarily 100% true about fucking physics or anything. But this is an example based on a joke in Big Bang Theory. Okay.
Oh God.
Yep. Leonard and Sheldon Sheldon was saying, "Oh, I proved X," and Leonard goes, "But you had to create 23 dimensions just to prove yourself right." Like he had to create X to make his math work. I don't know if that's a true thing. I don't know if that's a false thing, that actually happens in physics. But it's just that idea to me that like if you have to create something or if you have to build a premise to make sure you are right, to me that's a leap of faith in it, and that to me is like an educated guess to make that true. And I don't know if that's a real thing in fucking physics or not, or in mathematics or whatnot, that they have to like.
Well, look at it from like
I'm just taking it from
look at it
premise.
from like an engineering standpoint, right?
Sure.
So if you wanted to build a house that's never been built before, you may have to do a little bit of trial and error or use some of your base knowledge about engineering and structure to create whatever this new vision is that you have.
Right.
So I don't see how that's any different. Like, because you're not, it doesn't mean that it's incorrect or wrong in order to like, I want to design the structure and I have to test out or maybe design a different way of building the structure so that it's structurally sound.
Right. So to me, it's like this. You want to do trial and error, but if your first assumption, of how to make something work, even in engineering, which again is not a subject that I'm highly knowledgeable about, but I'm still going to rock this anyway. if your first assumption about how to build, let's say, a new type of house or a new design.
Sorry, I was listening
for
to.
a
I had to
house.
adjust my level a little bit.
Yeah, it happens.
It's
If you
picking
were-
up you for some reason.
Oh,
I think it was too high.
yeah,
Check it
that's
out.
kind of weird. But if your first assumption, okay, on a new way to build a house,
Yeah.
instead of testing it, you just said, this works, and here's the math on how I figured that out. But you've never actually built it to see if it actually works. To me, that's the same thing as saying, they worked out the math once upon a time, and
Yeah, but if we
They
didn't
knew
do
it
that,
was
wouldn't
round.
we all still be living in mud huts
hold on,
or
no.
log cabins?
But if what I'm saying is that through trial and error in engineering is how we figured out like what the most worthwhile shit is. They didn't just write down on paper, here's the math for it. That's all there is to it. They went and then they tested
yeah,
the
so
idea.
like math, the way you do that with math is you would take a bunch of measurements. So I think what they did was they used.
Yeah,
I don't-
because how would you figure out the world is round when you cannot
I think they
get
did
there?
it using they measured sun cast by shadows. So what they did was they put a big pole in a certain
Uh-huh.
point in the ground.
Uh-huh.
And then miles and miles away, they put another pole.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time of day, they would measure the shadow. And based on the length of the shadow, if the world was flat,
Mm-hmm.
then the shadow should be the same length, regardless of where you are at.
Even if the sun is moving?
Yes. If the world was flat, it wouldn't matter.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I can show you a
which-
diagram if I
No,
can
no,
find
no,
it.
no. You don't need to do that because we're just waxing intellectual here.
So basically, because the world is round, right? If you have a pole
Mm-hmm.
that's up here
Mm-hmm.
and a pole here,
Mm-hmm.
and the sun is shining, theoretically, if the world is round, the shadow should be longer on the more northern part of the
Okay.
of the where the
Even if the sun is doing this, an arc over it.
yes, as the sun moves. Well,
Uh-huh.
the sun doesn't move over us. We move around the sun.
No. What I'm saying is but that's what flat earther fuckers think.
Oh,
think
yeah.
The Earth. They think the sun rotates over us. And all I'm trying to say is, you're saying that there would be a difference in the length if the Earth is round. I'm saying, well, if the light source is moving. So basically, I'm playing devil's advocate because no, I do not believe the Earth is flat. If the light source moves, wouldn't that also change the length of the shadow?
It would depend how far away the light source is from you, I would think. If you're closer to the
Yes.
if the light source is closer to you, then I think it would make a bigger difference, but I'm not sure.
Neither am I. So, and instead of us looking up, Jazz,
No, I wanted to see if
Okay.
they had a picture, like a diagram.
of how you can determine the Earth is round.
Yeah, I did like the diagram. They basically did this. They did measured shadows,
Uh-huh.
but basically, yeah. So
Yeah.
like, no, they're the same side.
No, look. There's a flat Earth theory picture
God.
right there.
Yeah, they did a shadow
where
experiment.
where the sun is going like this around the flat Earth.
Yeah,
I'm
see
sorry. I'm sorry. That's fucked.
the angle,
Uh-huh.
the angle and the length of the shadow
Uh-huh.
will be different depending on where you're at. So
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Like
Anyway, but
I wasn't actually arguing any
no, but
of this.
I'm pretty sure that's how they calculated it.
Okay.
Because they said, well, if it's a circle
Yeah.
and you have a shadow,
Yeah.
or not a circle but a globe
Right.
and it's a shadow, the angle of the shadow is going to
Yeah.
be the angle and the length will be
Okay.
different depending on
Yeah,
where you're at,
I-
because the sunlight's hitting this. Like, let's
Dude,
assume.
dude, I actually do understand
yeah.
all of this.
Yeah.
I took a fucking earth science class once.
Yeah. But that's what I'm
Like-
saying. So,
By the way, we started this entire thing and
skepticism. You're being a skeptic now. No, I'm
right.
just kidding.
Like, I decided to go for it because fuck, why not? So the whole point is
I was telling you, as far as we know, like there weren't a ton of people who thought the world was flat.
Yeah. I got it. But there were people at some point. So the
I'm sure there were some.
So the point of what I was trying to say was not about that, obviously, but I was using it as a way to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And that turned into a pedantic fucking conversation about how we figured it out, which no shit, man. I've heard this before.
Yeah.
And we don't actually have evidence to support whether people truly believed
I remember
that
when
as
I was
the
in
masses or
when
not.
I was in grade school, people thought that like Columbus thought he was going to sail off the edge of the earth and stuff, but that's not true. Like they actually knew that it was round. They just thought it was smaller
than it actually was.
Yeah.
That part I had no idea, mostly because I don't give a shit about Christopher Columbus.
Well, that's why they thought that they could get to India by sailing through
around the earth. Well, I thought,
but they didn't know there was a whole other continent there.
Yeah. I thought he
because
had that idea.
The funny thing is, I believe that the Greeks' measurement of the earth was more accurate, which was like 1,000 years before. Not 1,000, but it was.
No, it's like 500. No.
So at the time of Columbus,
2000. No.
The European, apparently the measurements they had of the day, they thought the circumference of the earth was smaller.
Okay.
Or at least Columbus's people.
Yeah.
So they
Italian people.
Yeah, they thought the earth was smaller.
Yeah.
So they didn't realize there was this whole other continent there. Because they figured, the Earth should if we sail this way, we should just end up in India.
So let's go to this topic of skeptical and being skeptical of things, or skepticism.
I think that people get too skeptical about everything.
So me stopping you from looking it up, okay? To me, that's part of.
I just wanted to see if they had a picture. I was curious.
I know. But to me, the idea of constantly having to look up shit all the time, and I'm not saying you in particular, it's just a lot of people are constantly saying, prove your point of view. What evidence do you have to support it? I think that's part of a problem,
Well, what if it's not a point of view? Because I wasn't looking up a point of view. I wanted to see like if they had a diagram of the Greek experiment. Because I knew that was a thing. I just wanted to see if it was
a point of view. Because if I hold a different point of view than you, okay, and let's talk about flat earther fuckers, right? Like neither one of us are flat earther people, but there are flat earther people, okay, who hold this belief, right, that the earth is flat, and they have justification for it and all, and
they have to keep moving the goalposts because every time one of the things is debunked, they have to come up with a new theory.
Here's the point I'm trying to make, and not all the rest of the shit that surrounds it. Maybe instead of attacking them and proving them wrong, or declaring they must prove their opinion themselves, why not just have a conversation? And I think that's part of the problem nowadays with how cynical and skeptical we are about absolutely everything, is we no longer accept conversation.
If you're willing to, but most people probably aren't going to want to waste their time talking to a flat earther because
they think they're smarter than them.
Well, no.
And when you look down on somebody, you're not willing to waste time.
You might, but that's not what I was going to say. I was going to say that
you weren't.
A lot of people are going to say, well, it's not my job to try to combat this misinformation. And two, like, do you want to invest an hour of your time talking to somebody to convince them that they might be wrong about whatever it is they believe? Like, why? What's the benefit to you? Why is it worth it to you to try to debunk these people or have a conversation with them?
Well, what's the benefit to you? For one, if you want your opinion to be heard, then you need to allow other people's opinion to be heard.
Well,
two, if you are a person like a lot of folks in our community, of autistic community or disability community, if you want change to come about, okay, and if you want to voice that frustration or whatever that people don't accept autistic people, if you're not willing to hear out somebody else's opinion, you need to shut the fuck up yourself. Like, I'm actually tired of hearing people say, it's not my job to educate the world. Well, if it's not your job to educate the world, then I guess it's also not your job to bring about change. Then it's also not your job to voice your opinion in a public place, because they deserve to, even if they're fucking wrong, and they're horribly goddamn wrong, they still deserve to have a voice too. And the easiest way to get somebody to hear your point of view is for you to listen to their point of view.
So I think, and I brought up Daryl Davis a million times on this podcast. He does exposure, right?
Yes.
So he kind of does what you're talking about, where instead of just like shitting on people, he's like, well, these people have a point of view that I don't agree with, and they're racist, and he becomes friends with them, and then he changes their mind. So he wins them over with honey instead of vinegar, right?
Yes.
And I think that's an effective way to change people's minds, which is why I bring him up all the time.
However, highly respected dude.
Most people are not going to want to invest that much energy,
Right.
because it can be very tiring and taxing to try to deal with somebody, especially if they have a really ignorant or shitty point of view.
And yet a lot of those people cry out that everybody needs to listen to them.
But like flat earthers in particular are very frustrating to deal with, because no matter what, they always have some excuse as to why science is wrong.
Hold on.
NASA's faking images of the Earth.
Yeah, hold on. I want to point out the way you're describing them, and I think this is part of the reason why it becomes taxing or irritable or annoying for people to deal with people they don't agree
Same
with.
thing I said with Trump supporters earlier, with the hardcore Trump supporters who always have some excuse.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
It's the way. So what I was trying to say was the way you're framing all of it. You immediately assume they're wrong. You immediately assume they have bad information.
Well, I
they're
don't.
ignorant. Well, the wording you're using, this is what I'm. A lot of people hold a perspective, okay, that they are right, okay, and that means they automatically believe that the other person is automatically wrong.
So
and they hold their opinion in lesser regard.
So what do you tell a Trump supporter who's ride or die Trump supporter, and you have a conversation with them about January 6th,
Yes.
and Trump trying to overthrow the democratic process,
Yes.
and you bring up, well, did you know that the New York Times published a memo? It's called the Eastman Memo, which was a plan from his administration laid out as to how he would try to steal the election. Did you know that exists? And most of them probably haven't heard of it or have not read it. But anytime you bring up factual information that we actually have in writing,
Yes.
they will either have some sort of way to, they'll have an excuse or a way to dismiss it.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about. Same thing with flat earthers. If you bring up, well, we have photos from space.
Yes.
Those are fake. The satellites are fake. So it doesn't matter what you present to them, no matter what information you provide or present. And I'm not even saying to do it in a mean way or condescending way. I'm just saying if you bring it up in conversation, they have a way to explain it away. Same thing with Trump. People will give him a million excuses,
Right,
because there's this weird cult of personality surrounding him.
Yes.
That no matter what he does, people have a way to explain away his behavior or just ignore it.
And you say it's a weird cult of personality, but I think straightforward, it is a cult of quote unquote personality around all of these things. Like flat earthers, right? It's a cult of personality surrounding the idea of flat earthers. Trump has the same thing. People become diehard in this, especially when they're not only questioned, but they're automatically assumed to be full of shit. Now, I approach it from, help me understand your point of view. That anytime I'm talking to somebody, and by the way, I do have a friend who does not believe that January 6th was prompted by former President Trump, that was advocated by former President Trump.
Depends on what you mean by prompted.
So the memo thing you're talking about, how there was that plan?
Yeah.
He does not believe in that. He believes that that is a Democrat conspiracy.
It was submitted to a court. It was presented as evidence in court.
Yes, and he believes that somebody doctored that and created it. By the way, I'm not going to use this person's name because I don't want anybody to give him
That's kind of what
shit.
I'm saying, is no matter what you provide, there's always some like conspiracy or alternative explanation.
Yes. But hold on. His backing up of this information is this, that we do know at times in American history that government agencies have faked and doctored things to make them look a certain way.
The problem is with certain things like flat earth and this Trump thing is when there's an overwhelming amount of evidence. There's a difference when it's like...
But this is why I said the cult
like,
of
I get
personality
why people have unanswered questions about like the JFK assassination, even though all the evidence points to the official story, but people have all these crazy conspiracies. There's always like when there's gaps in information or things we don't understand, people try to fill it in with their own...
With whatever it is.
Right.
Did you know there's somebody...
With the Trump thing, there's so much overwhelming evidence.
Well, there's a ton of evidence about the JFK thing, but there are still people who write books about it and still say that the government was involved.
Instead of you being wrong about flat earth, NASA is fake, NASA is wrong,
hold on.
Science is wrong.
Hold on. And here's my thing about it, though. If you come at somebody, and I don't care the topic, and yes, both of these topics are easily like,
well, science is wrong sometimes. Yes, they are. But
actually, yes. But in the process of finding the truth, not in the process of just being wrong.
But all of none of the evidence points to their theory, though. All the evidence points to what we believe now.
Exactly. So when it comes to a bunch of these, like the two topics we're bringing up are pretty easy to dismiss, right? But there are other topics that it's not as easy to dismiss when it comes to this, and people still look at them as if they're fucking flat earthers.
Like what? Sorry, I don't know what you mean.
Well, I mean, abortion is a topic that I think is a little bit more nuanced than certain things, but people get real hard up on it. I think everything on the planet has kind of that cult of personality-esque fanatic to it. And I think, unfortunately, we live right now in a time that the fanatic of something is the one that is viewed or prototyped as all people who carry that opinion.
Isn't that how it's always been, though? Like, I might be,
kinda.
It might be worse now in some ways, but I feel like it's always been that way.
Well, I think because of social media, we're creating and reinforcing more people who are like that.
Have you ever heard of that concept? And I don't remember what it's actually called. There's a concept when it comes to social studies, and that people get a sense of like amnesia. Like we forget about the past. We forget about past events. And I'm not even talking about like World War II where you and I weren't even alive. I mean, like even events that happened earlier in your lifetime. Right. Like we always feel like whatever happening now is the most important thing that's ever happened before. Right. Whereas like humans tend to, like we tend to repeat things and things tend to happen. So we have this feeling that like things are more tense now than they've ever been. But if you look back at other times in US history in particular, which we're only like, you know, a little over 200 years old. Yeah. There's been other times
check you on that,
like there was a reason why somebody tried to shoot Ronald Reagan. There's a reason somebody tried to shoot President Gerald Ford. Yeah. There have been other times where we've been polarized. And what's funny is if you go look up videos from the 60s, 70s, and 80s of politicians giving speeches, a lot of the same talking points and arguments that they're talking about are the same as now. Right. In the 90s. And people feel like this is a new thing, but it's not. No. Like a lot of the same arguments we've been having over things are the same arguments we've been having for 30, 40 years.
Every time I hear somebody say that we are more divisive now than we've ever been. Bullshit.
I mean, Civil War?
Yeah, like I'm not saying that there's a time period where we were more divisive, although that would be a good example of probably when we were more divisive.
That started from the founding of the country itself. There was already a divide when the nation was founded. There was already a divide between the North
papers and any Federalist
and the North, kind of North and South type divide. There was there was a movement towards abolition almost since the founding of the country. Yeah. It's just that it didn't really pick up steam until the mid 1800s. And it wasn't just the abolitionists, but it was also like kind of the federal versus state type argument there, like federal power versus state power. But I mean, there was obviously the events that led up to the Civil War had a lot to do with the expansion out west, right? Yeah. Because the northern states didn't want more slave states, and the southern states wanted more slave states, and they were trying to figure out these new states that are being created, these new territories, would they be slave territories or not?
Well, I think what they were, and I'm not a historian. I didn't start the episode by saying we're not experts in anything. All right. I don't know if they wanted more slave states or if they just wanted to protect what they had. Because here's the thing, if you get more free states or anti-slave states, then they'll get outvoted. So I think maybe they didn't necessarily want more slave states.
Well, yeah, that would be part of the reason why they wanted more. They wanted the newer territories to be slave territories,
so they
or slave
can
states,
maintain their
so
own.
that they could have. They didn't want to be outvoted or outpowered, because if you had admitted new states in and they had power in the Senate.
Yeah. By the way, I can be completely wrong to anybody who's listening. I could be completely wrong on that assessment. They might have been like trying to recruit states to fucking keep people enslaved. I have no idea. Yeah. I'm just throwing that out there. You're not going to look it up, are you?
No, I wanted to check something.
But I think that's part of the problem is everybody has become, getting back to the idea of being skeptical and the cynicism of things. I think the more access we have to information, the more lawyery people have become, the more prove it to me kind of thing. And I really truly think that we need to get back to a period of time where random Joe Schmo everybody, or random, human being, general, human being, should just get more comfortable with conversation and just hearing people out, right? Not immediately jump into their phone and being like, oh, look, here's proof of my point of view. Haha, you're an idiot. I think we need to all stop trying to prove that we're smarter than the next person over, because I think far too many people, A, have found success by doing that. And B, I think far too many people have decided, if I can prove you wrong, that makes me good, or that makes me better.
Well,
somehow.
on the flip side of that,
I don't dig that. I really dislike this whole, everybody's got to be the smartest person in the fucking room. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. We're all equally as smart as one another, just in different fucking categories.
I don't care about being correct so much as I care about being wrong. And what I mean by that is, I want to make sure. It's like, if I'm trying to check my information, it's not that I want to be correct. It's more so that I don't want to be telling people things that are incorrect.
Okay, so I'm going to.
I don't want to spread, because if I tell you something that's wrong and then you go repeat it to someone else, now I'm helping to spread incorrect information. I don't want to do that.
Gotcha. So here's my question on that, and I've asked you this in a private way, but I'm going to ask you now in a more public way, and I'll try to keep it only just not super personal, but a little bit. You say you look it up to make sure you're not wrong. Then why then share that to somebody that you're having a conversation with, if you're just trying to prove you right?
It's not, but that's the thing. I don't look at it as me proving me right. I look at it as,
I mean, you're proving
if I
to
say,
yourself.
hey, Nick, Teddy Roosevelt was, this is not something
a serial rapist.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But
something he was potentially.
But I was going to say, like, something I could actually look up. But if I, like, because you're not going to go spread misinformation about Teddy Roosevelt. So that would, but like something more important would be, like, if I told you, for instance, here's an example the other day. A lot of conservatives were talking about that woman in the Olympics, the boxing, I forget her name. What was that boxer's name?
Yeah, the Algerian person. Yeah.
I just want to make sure, because I'm bad with names, I want to make sure I get her name. Imane Khelif, right? That's her name. Imane Khelif. So people were saying, oh, she's a man, she's this, she's that, or like, whatever. Or saying she was trans and all this stuff. I didn't know anything about her. I looked it up. And I had read on some website that she was born intersex, which is apparently now called DSD, a developmentally sexual disorder, because I guess intersex is too political now. But anyway.
Yeah, I still know it by the old term.
Well, some people identify as intersex and some don't. So I guess it's more of an identity thing from what I read.
Sure.
I don't know much about it. Anyway, the point was, I tried to look it up from other sources because I wanted to say something about it. I was going to say something about it on social media, but I didn't know if the person actually was intersex or DSD, just because I read it from one place. So I tried to find information like, does this person actually DSD? Because if I went and spread it around, now I'm spreading misinformation about a person. That's not true. Like, I wouldn't want to go online and say that this is a stupid example, because this would never happen. But let's say you had cancer, and I'm telling people, oh, Nick had cancer, and you never had cancer. That's not really as harmful. It's kind of weird, but I don't want to go and spread around something about you that's not true.
Well, for one, wouldn't it come into like the legal realm of like defamation and slander?
No, it could.
Okay.
But like saying that somebody's incorrectly saying somebody was born intersex if they're not, I don't think that would be considered defamation.
So actually on this, I didn't know as much because I didn't care to look up anything about this person, but what little I saw on social media, and we know how correct that shit is, all I saw was that this person had, because of some organization, they had their genetics tested and they were XY chromosome.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is born male. I don't know how this person identifies. Some people said that they do identify trans, and some people said they don't identify trans. I have no idea. I just know that some people were calling this person a man because they had XY. Now, for one, XY chromosomes just makes you male, not man. I will always keep that distinction. I know that distinction between the two of those is being lost nowadays in conversation, but I will always keep that standpoint that there is a difference between being male and being man. I will always keep that. I don't care how you socially want to identify this shit. I'm just making sure people understand my point of view on that. But I looked at it as, okay, if the person is born XY, okay, which until you educated me a little bit last night, I had no idea there was extra parts to this. I had no idea that there was some disorder that affects the Y chromosome. I didn't know any of this. But what I knew was this person was tested XY chromosome. And so because of that, I knew that there were certain, like, I don't want to call them benefits, but differences if you have an XY or XX when it comes to like hand-eye coordination. And then what was the tendon reflex tensy thing?
Your muscle? You mean like fast twitch muscle?
The twitch something.
Men typically have more fast twitch muscle fiber than women.
Great. So that thing, and I could have sworn
it means like for in the I'm not an expert about this
experts.
Stuff. As far as I understand, having more fast twitch muscle fibers makes it easier for you to activate and move your muscles.
Great. So there's that. And I also always thought that like testosterone made your muscles able to grow faster and denser.
Yeah, they're more mass. Yeah.
Yeah, more mass. And so with those differences, if a person is born XY chromosome, all of that would be a benefit to the person. And due to that, now that the person is
bone density
20s, I
That's
guess.
Another one, I believe.
Yep. Okay. And with all of that, because they were born XY, male, there's an advantage this person has in boxing over born female. And so because of that, I kind of went, oh, okay, that fucking sucks. And there's that other organization, which we can call transphobic, or we can call them something phobic.
What organization? I don't know.
There's some organization that tested this person and said they're not allowed to fight against a female because of it.
I don't know. I didn't look too deeply into this person's background or the story. What I did look into was because I was interested about the chromosome thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's my point is that, so related to the skepticism thing.
Yes.
There's a bunch of people talking out of their ass and saying stuff about this person that they know nothing about, calling them trans, saying all this stuff. And it's like, first of all, you don't know this person. Second of all, what you're saying is not even true because you don't understand how chromosomes work and sexual development works.
Right.
So if you don't have that prerequisite information, now you're just saying bullshit and you're saying something that is actually hurtful to somebody.
So in fact, they're doing it to sensationalize it, to make it public knowledge so they get more attention. And look, even me and you were talking about it.
Right. So that was my problem with it, is people going around and saying stuff that's not true because they think they know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my problem, is like, you should also, that level of skepticism you have towards everything, you should also have towards yourself.
I agree.
And you need to be able to question yourself, admit when you're wrong, and also just keep in mind that you could be wrong.
Yes.
Because everyone who's online on Twitter and saying, well, it's a man fighting a woman. Well, it's not really that simple.
Yeah.
First of all, they're not a man.
They are a male. XY.
They're not even a male.
Well, yeah, you tried to explain this to me. I am medically dumb. I can admit to that.
Well, that was my whole point, is you can be female, but born with XY chromosomes.
You tried to explain how that works, and again, medically kind of an idiot.
So when we're babies, when we're fetuses,
we're female.
Right. So the fetus starts out developing in what would essentially be a female body type, quote unquote.
Uterus.
Yeah. Well,
ovaries.
I mean, there's no uterus yet, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like, it starts developing so basically, if nothing else happened, we would all be born female.
Right.
What happens if you have a Y chromosome? There are certain things, certain genes that are supposed to be activated.
Right.
That basically turn your innie into an outie.
Right.
And you develop the male gonads, whatever you want to call them, right?
Testes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a penis, right?
Yes.
And all that. If somebody has a genetic issue with their Y chromosome,
right,
sometimes those don't get activated. So
in,
you're actually
like in
born.
This case you're talking about.
Yes. So you're actually born female,
Mm-hmm.
even though you have a Y chromosome, or born, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term, I'm saying born female because you're born with a with an innie.
So could we refer to that as a
traditionally
gene abnormality?
It's called the well, it's a sexual disorder or developmental sexual disorder is what they call it. But it's basically because it's not developing the Y chromosome's not activating and developing you the way that it typically
in the most
should.
common of ways.
Yeah. So that's basically what happened. But anyway, the point is
piss
that
off that guy who doesn't like me using the word normal.
the people who are complaining about this shit on Twitter or on social media,
Right.
have no fucking clue what they're talking about. And to be honest with you, I didn't know that much about it either. But what happened is, I saw the situation and I was curious. So I'm like, huh, they were born female, but they had XY. And I'm like, cause I know a little bit about like, there's certain genetic conditions that can cause, genetic, sexual development disorders, right? There's a bunch of different ones where you can actually have like 3 chromosomes. You can have X, Y, and stuff like that. Like you can have, so I didn't know much about this particular thing that this person has. So I watched a video from a doctor who was talking about these developmental things. And I was like, oh, that's interesting because I didn't know. But the thing is, most people don't, because it's not, the point of it isn't even about this person.
Right.
The whole purpose of what these people are doing is to shit on trans people.
Not just, but yes. I think their whole purpose is to get themselves some attention, but also shit on anything that's outside of what they deem perceptually to be what happens most often, or as Nick likes to say, normal.
Why are conservatives so focused on trans issues all the time? That like, seems to be like a major thing they talk about all the time.
I don't think it's just conservatives or Republicans. I think it's both sides. I think they both try to fixate on that shit a lot. Well, and they both claim for opposite reasons, but I think it's for the same fucking reason.
Like according to conservatives on social media, like all of the trans people and all the gay community are a bunch of groomers trying to
all the LGBTs.
They're trying to groom your children.
Yeah,
and we talked about this in one of the first episodes about how like people think that there's this weird conspiracy. I'll call it a conspiracy that there's all these kids trying to transition and shit, which is just not true. They think there's all these kids like on hormone blockers and trying to get their.
That's what they see on TV.
But it's not happening. There's not a bunch of kids out there trying to get their penises cut off.
There is far more now than there was 20 years ago, according to a bunch of these people.
Find me any kids who have had their dicks cut off.
I don't look shit like that up.
I'm saying that
I don't care.
Kids are not out there getting bottom surgery.
I don't know either way, by the way. I have no idea. And again, it's also not something I would look up. I will say this much, though. Like something JRE says, or at least on one of the episodes, JRE pointed this out, that since, I think it's 2019, this person puts out the stat of it. Since 2019, the number of gender-affirming clinics or sex change clinics has like quadrupled or some shit. Like it's massively exponentially grown since 2019. And so in their estimation, this is due to just people trying to make money off of this. I don't doubt that's a true statement. I don't doubt that there are more people now who have identity issues or gender issues or that there are more of that now than there was 25 years ago.
That the medical industry is trying to make money off of people transitioning? Is that the argument?
That's what this person said.
It seems like a brain dead argument to me, but
no, I don't doubt that people are greedy as fuck and they will try anything to gain more money. They will jump on whatever it is in the media, whatever they possibly can to get more money. I don't doubt that's a possibility. It's one of those downsides to capitalism is things go a little bit too far with humans and they get real greedy about some shit.
I'm sure there's a financial incentive, maybe, but like, I don't think that it's like this vast thing that these companies are pushing. Like, oh, we got to transition people so we can make money.
But if there is vastly more clinics out there now than there was in 2019, like, what would be the point in creating tons more clinics? And it's definitely not just to help people.
What do you mean by clinics?
Like, literally, there are, or at least according to this person, I've never looked this up. I have no fucking clue. So this could be misinformation.
Like,
I don't know.
There's clinics that just deal with gender?
Yeah.
I've never...
Apparently there are more. By the way, like neither one of us have looked this shit up and you're about to fucking...
No, I want to see if there's one in here. So apparently they're everywhere, so...
Well, that's how this person worded it. is there
Gender
is
clinic near me.
a
Let's see.
ton more now than there
Center
were.
for Transgender Health, Brigham and Women's Hospital.
There you go.
Okay.
Although that's part of a hospital, so I wouldn't necessarily say. I mean, it is specific to.
By center, they probably just mean they have like a couple rooms.
Yeah,
in the hospital.
yeah, exactly.
Like, what is?
Exactly.
I think that
Exactly.
I'm. This is my skepticism kicking in. It sounds to me like, confirmation bias. That's what it sounds like to me. But I don't know.
I don't.
It sounds
doubt
like
that
this
that's
person
true.
is
I don't
looking
doubt
for a
that that's
problem and
true.
trying to find one.
Yeah, I don't doubt that that's true. But I also do know that people are going to try to capitalize on some shit. Because, by the way, even if that is inside a hospital and it's like 2 rooms inside of a hospital that they're calling a center for, the fact that they specifically identify center for.
Well, like
block,
Mass General has an
That's-
autism center,
yes,
but it's like it's still part of Mass General, but they
Right.
have I don't know if I would even call it a wing, but it's basically they have a section where they do testing for that.
right, and they give it a fancy name, an easy way to look it up when you're looking for a place to bring your autistic person.
But it's not like they're like opening clinics that just specialize in gender stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. I have no idea.
And even still, well, you could argue the chicken or the egg thing, right? Like, are there more clinics because more people are just deciding they're trans, or is it that more people are
Willing to come forward
willing
about
to
it?
come forward and that they're more comfortable doing it?
I think that's probably more the case. Is there are far more people now that are a little bit more comfortable than they were to be able to come out.
To be themselves.
Yeah,
Like, same thing that happened with homosexuality.
Exactly.
The gay community back when
Exactly.
everybody used to be in the closet and
Yes.
people used to get married and pretend they
Yeah.
were straight, and now
and now there's a
society's
lot
more
more.
accepting of it. So they're
Yeah,
able
let's
to-
just say it's more out there more. I don't know about the whole more accepting. I'm going to say that being a bisexual
that's a
male.
wild statement.
Well, I'm going to say that as a bisexual male, that like, I don't know if I can say that it's more accepted. I would have to say it's just more visible.
I would say, compared to 20 years ago, like even when I was in high school,
Yes. I'm still going to say that because just because we see it more on social media, just because we see it more on TV, just because we hear less homophobic statements, doesn't mean it's more
so
accepted.
people are just underground bigots now.
Yes.
I think that
Shit.
there's
If there's still members of the
not-
Nazi party in America,
I'm not.
I would have
yeah,
to
but
say
they're a
underground.
small minority.
No, they absolutely are, but they still exist.
like
like
your son's generation.
Yeah.
Like Gen Alpha, Gen Z, and millennials.
Mhm.
I think are super down with the LGBT community. I think it's more like
I think
Gen Z and Boomers. I know
think-
you're part of Gen Z, but
I
like
am.
I think the older
Wait,
generations.
I'm not Gen Z.
Yeah, you are.
No,
I mean Gen X. I mean,
Yeah, I'm an X.
I think Gen X.
Thank you.
Gen X, Boomers.
Yeah.
I think it's more that generation. I'm not saying that there's not millennials out there who are anti-LGBTQ. I'm just saying that
Or
like, I
somewhere
know,
in the middle between
my generation-
supporting an anti.
when
Yeah.
when I was younger is kind of when a lot of that started to change. Like people stopped saying the F slur. People stopped
Dude,
saying
there's still people who say it.
yeah, but
And even in those generations. Hey,
I'm not saying it's gone. My point was that it's much better.
I think
Like,
people are just hiding it better.
It used to be like 2 guys kissing in public was a huge deal, and nowadays like if you see 2 girls or 2 guys kissing in public, no one cares.
It's not
One
as-
guy might be like, "Oh, it's gross,"
Yeah,
but
but
like
it's-
most people don't give a shit.
I mean, let's be a little bit more nuanced on this. Like, I was born in 1980. I was a teenager in the 90s, right? And yes, there was a lot more of it outright, and there was more overtly there was acceptance to it. But there are still.
It all
and there
started with
was
Will and
still-
Grace. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, thanks, Just Jack. Sean Hayes, his character. Never mind.
No, I know.
Yes, I watched a lot of that show. Anyway,
I was joking,
I-
but it probably did help to destigmatize.
absolutely. Ellen coming out on TV helped destigmatize that. Rosie O'Donnell coming out, like, absolutely. I almost accidentally said Roseanne Barr, but it was Rosie O'Donnell. Anyway, I think overtly there is more acceptance, but I don't believe there's actually more acceptance. Do I believe those generations appear to have more acceptance? And yeah, and I say appear to. I'm not in y'all's generation. I didn't go to high school in y'all's generation, but I do know that shit still exists. I do know that there are still the popular kids in high school that are picking on everybody else, and I still know that people, human beings, have tendency to identify something that they view as different or weird, and they will pick on
If
it.
what you're saying is true, then why are a lot more people on paper members of the LGBT community now? More people are coming out. More people are open about it than they were 20 years ago.
Because I think the overt social idea is more acceptance, or that you can be. Because there were also, along the way, that the community itself, the LGBT community, started to form up and structure better. We know somebody who we were in the bar together at one point, and they actually said that they don't really understand and or like trans people. And this person is gay. Now, their opinion may have changed since then, but I remember being in the bar sitting next to you when they said such a statement. But I think as a whole, the LGBT community has come together better over the last 20 years. And I think...
You don't think people are more accepting in general? Like, it seems like a crazy statement to me.
I'm
not saying you're wrong, but it's just like, people are able to come out more. It seems like much more generally accepted by people.
I think people bite their tongue more now than they did.
But if people are just hiding it, then aren't you like chasing boogeymen, like chasing ghosts? Because you're assuming that there's hate there where you can't see it.
No, because I can hear the hate. I hear the comments because people do not identify me as being part of the LGBT community.
Do you think that we have the same level of racism now as we did 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
Do I think it's the same level?
Yeah.
Meaning, do I think there's as many people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? You don't think that society in general is much less racist than it was 40 years ago?
Not necessarily, no, because one of the
seems crazy to me.
Absolutely, and I bet there's somebody who just heard me say that, and they're like, Nick is the most ignorant man on the planet. We're way more progressive now than we were. What I think ultimately, or in general for society, I think that we are more willing to hear about minority struggle.
Like I'm not saying that it doesn't exist in either case. I'm just saying, like, it seems like people from marginalized communities are much better off than they were 20 to 40 years ago.
To me, that's two separate things. Yes, they're much better off because there are more laws now protecting.
But it's not just protection. I think that, like, people being hateful and actions, I can't measure somebody's invisible hate.
Right, well, but that's just it.
I'm saying
there isn't invisible hate. I mean, there is visible hate, but it just kind of has morphed a little bit into.
I'd be curious to see if there's statistics on, like.
Put it this way. I work in a field, okay, where there are still people who say MR, okay, mental R. Somebody translate for you, buddy, if you're listening to this. I'm not going to use that word on our podcast. But there are still people who use that in not just medical settings, but there are clinicians I've heard say it because it's still on the person's diagnosis list. And they still say it as if it's still a thing. Asperger's is still talked about regularly. I don't necessarily have a problem with that word because I was diagnosed with that, and I found great comfort in finding out that I was different than other people and that there are others like me, and we all identify with that word. And there are still people in our community who accept that word. But nobody should be diagnosed with that anymore because it doesn't actually exist as a diagnosis
I think
anymore.
part of the problem with the
And I know we were talking about race, and then we said marginalized communities, like autism or disabilities is a marginalized community.
So I think that
there's quite a few marginalized communities that I'm talking about that have more visibility, but there is still shitty converstions being had about them.
It seems like
there is still opinions that are affecting how people help people.
Seems like for LGBTQ people that most of the hate nowadays is centered more on the trans people. Because like when I was talking about like gay people being more accepted, I was thinking more like for gay, lesbian people, bisexual people, it seems like most people just don't really care. Like just kind of like whatever.
I wouldn't say that. If you're a bisexual male, you're still shit on quite a bit.
By who?
You wouldn't hear it. Like, honestly, and I'm not trying to like say you're incapable of understanding or hearing it. It's just you wouldn't necessarily hear it because you're not a bisexual male. You don't hear the comments and things that people say, and they're not in direct relation to, but there's definitely an implication to it. And then the direct comments people make. I mean, the fact that see, and I can't necessarily say because of how emotional I am, it has anything to do with one thing or another, because I'm like autistic and bipolar and bisexual. Like it could be an assortment of those things, but I'm far more emotional than most, or at least overtly emotional than most men. Like I told you, I spent this morning crying because I kept watching videos on TikTok about like people who got reunited with their mothers who gave them up for adoption.
Anybody who's listening, I'm not saying like, because I'm sure somebody's gonna be like, well, Steve doesn't think that there's hate against LGBTQ people, or that I'm like, no, I'm not saying that.
He's
I'm
just
saying that
not as much.
I'm saying that I feel like society is generally more accepting of LGBTQ people, except for maybe the T, because that seems to be where most of the people, a lot of the hate and a lot of the bigotry seems to be coming from people who have issues with trans folk. Yeah. But I'm saying as far as like,
so here's the
gay community.
Here's the thing. Let's get either lesbian friends of ours or gay friends of ours together, and let's go out to dinner with them. And all I want you to do is when they walk in the room or they kiss each other or they hold hands or hug each other, I want you to look around the room at how many people are actually paying attention to it.
Yeah, but if somebody was like, if a heterosexual couple was kissing, I'm sure people would look too.
Next time me, you, Natalie, and Lauren all go out, look around.
Like if I'm sitting at a table and I see a couple get up and they kiss, they're probably going to catch my attention, even just for a second or two. I'm not going to.
But look at the way they're looking at them, and look at who's looking predominantly. Like I can tell you just because of being in those situations, and yes, it's anecdotal at best, and yes, it's confirmation bias. It absolutely is, because I already believe that.
So you're saying today is basically the same as Stonewall?
No, I didn't say that either.
Well, that's kind of my point. Is like,
I didn't say that either. But I think the same level of dislike, disdain, prejudice, and bias against people that are, and I'm going to say it this way, that are different or abnormal from the vast majority of society, I think they will always be looked down on. Yeah. Because they're even the
whoever's not the majority.
I can't believe I'm about to say it this way, but there are those white liberals who like say, oh, we need to put more attention on them. Oh, these people need more help. But they're looking down on people in the process of saying it.
Yeah, no, I get that. And society always has outcasts, the minority. Yes. Whoever is the majority is typically the people that are considered quote unquote normal.
Normal, yeah.
And that anybody who doesn't fit whatever that criteria is that the majority is abnormal in some way, or just not. There's something different about them, right?
I get. Would be abnormal.
I think that in general.
Oh, and there's nothing wrong with being abnormal.
I would argue that I think that society in general is much more accepting of people with differences, even though there's still a lot of that. I think that a lot of people are more accepting. And then even if people do have issues, I think people are more aware or cognizant of their biases than they were 20, 30 years ago. I also think that, and I will challenge you on this, please, and our friends, if they agreed with you, I would challenge them to say, remember what I said earlier about everybody always looking to today and forgetting about the past, having amnesia. Yeah. It's easy to say, well, life is the worst now than it's ever been. Right. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm just saying that people think that whatever's happening in the moment is the most important thing ever. Right. Right. Whatever's happening now, what I was saying before, like our polarization is so bad now. It's never been worse. Right. Yeah. That's I'm exaggerating there. But when I ask you, like, are things better now than they were 20 years ago for people in certain communities? I think that a lot of people would be prone to just automatically say yes without doing much thought about it. I think that people are going to be biased in their answer because we're biased towards the present and we forget about the past. Yeah. That's my point. Yeah. Is saying we're biased because even though my difficulties may or maybe not be as bad, let's say I'm not gay, but when I was in high school, I was a member of the Gay Straight Alliance. I was a member of the Diversity Coalition.
You in fact was nominated to be leader of the group?
It was really dumb. I'm like, why are you guys voting me? But anyway, because I didn't nominate myself.
Yeah.
But the point, I've always been around the community.
Right.
So I don't have firsthand experience. All my experience is secondhand from being around a lot of queer people.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time. It seems to me like I used to see a lot more people being openly hateful.
Yes.
Does that mean that they're not making comments or they're not thinking things? I can't speak for what's on people's minds, but I can say that it seems like people are a lot more kind and accepting. Like back when, even 15 years ago, if I went to Bobby's, people were like, oh, the gay bar. And nowadays, like, I don't hear those type of comments as often.
Really? Because I still hear that. Not as often, don't get me wrong. But
That's my
still
point.
hear it.
I think that people need to consider that we have a bias towards the present, and a lot of times we forget the struggles and things we've been through in the past, and you feel like things are bad, but consider where you've been and how bad things have been in the past.
And don't get me wrong, if people become closeted hate, it does make things better. Okay, because then people are not ridiculed in public as much, and they're not called out as much in public, and so it can help the people of that community, whatever that minority community is, whatever that disenfranchised group is. They can feel a little bit better.
I picture our community.
Yeah,
I picture our community, and I know how our people are sometimes. So I just pictured a bunch of people in the autistic community hate mobbing me because they think I'm saying that. Because, the all or nothing thinking, and they're thinking Steve's saying that there's no LGBTQ hate. And I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm trying to make sure I cover myself. I'm saying that I feel like there's less and that it's easier for people. Okay. And people are going to say, no, it's not easy for me. People are mean to me. They're going to judge me. And it's like,
yeah, we're talking about the community
as a
whole. We're not talking about your individual story.
I'm also speaking comparatively.
Yes.
Comparatively to the past. There was a lot more racism in the past than there is now. I'm not saying racism still exists. It's still a problem. But I'm saying the Klan still exists, but they're much smaller than they used to be.
Yeah.
At least as far as I know.
Yeah, I got you.
Same thing you brought up neo-Nazis. There are neo-Nazis, but there's a lot less of them.
There is a lot less of them here's the thing though, is that we know of. And I'm going to say this. People have a dislike for what they don't understand. People have a dislike for what they don't know. Okay. Everybody likes to say, oh, I don't like change, but that's fucking change, right? If you come across a group that you've never heard of before, and they're claiming to be, a different variation of human of some type, and it goes against your current belief, there's always going to be a level of hesitation. And this is to most people, not all of us. There will always be a level of hesitation, skepticalness to it. There's going to be a level of cynicism to it. There's going to be a level of some type of negativity, all the way up, including a bias and a prejudice against this thing you've never heard of. And so there's always going to be that, because that's a natural fucking reaction for somebody to have.
Like autistic people with food?
Yes. Or autistic people with things that are new. And by the way, not all autistic people have a problem with change. It's a varying scale of level of discomfort.
This might have been inappropriate or cringy or inappropriate when I was younger, but whenever I met somebody who was different, I was more curious. And being a younger person, I probably didn't realize that it may have come across as inappropriate or strange. Yeah. But if I met somebody from a different culture, I usually just wanted to know more about them and their culture because I found it interesting. I'm like, I've always thought that learning about other cultures is interesting. I was born in India. I was raised there. Tell me about it. What's it like there? What's the food like? What's it like? Because I want to know about your culture. But I find it interesting. Yeah. I never looked at people who have a different background than me as they're weird and strange. I just was curious. It's more curiosity on my part. But
so I'm gonna expose my, at one point, ignorance. If not, I have already told you about enough of my ignorances right now. But once upon a time, when I first heard of the idea of furries, okay, when I first heard of this idea, and I'm giggling a little bit because I still have some biases against it.
Oh God!
But when I first heard of the idea, I thought it was the dumbest, stupidest preference on the planet. I thought this was horrible of an idea. People want to fuck animals. People want to act like they're fucking animals, right? The entire the people who want to act like in their relationships they're kitties and dogs and stupid bunnies and shit, and the people who want to dress up and fucking cosplay as these animals and get fucked or something. I thought it was so stupid and so dumb, and oh my God, why in the fuck are these people choosing this? As I've gotten older, 20 years now, and it took me a long time to get over this, but the more and more I learned, and the more I met people who actually have this preference. I actually met somebody, right? And I didn't know when I first met her. I didn't know that she had this preference, this predilection, if you will. But she eventually exposed it to me and told me that she likes it. And I asked some questions and shit. And I said, can I please understand this? Can I ask you some questions about it? And I told her, I'm not asking you questions to question your life choices. I just want to understand. And we talked about it for a little while.
I found out that the girl I was dating likes to take 30 dicks in the mouth at once. And I was just curious. I'm like, tell me about that. Like, how does that work?
So, no, it wasn't a girl I was dating. She's a friend of mine. I'm still friends with her. And I mean her no disrespect if any of this comes out that way. I don't mean her no
my first experience was at a glory hole.
So she starts telling me about it a little bit. And obviously, it's just her rationale and her belief of it, her understanding of it. Not everybody's in that whole fucking community, but she was telling me about hers. And she just said, at one point she said, I don't know, it just makes me feel better. But because I got the exposure and the opportunity, to talk to somebody in that community without having to read a fucking bunch of shit online. I got to talk to somebody, a real human being from that community, the Daryl Davis idea, to a degree. I was able to find out.
You talking to a furry is exactly the same as converting a KKK member.
I did not say the same. I said in a little bit. No, I'm going and talking to somebody who has an opinion that I don't agree with.
Yeah.
And I'm finding out more from their perspective about it, and not just assuming and not just being like, well, why? Why do you need a collar around your neck? Why do they need you to, why do you need them to feed you milk before you can get turned on? Nope, that's their fucking thing. But essentially, I was kink shaming a bunch of motherfuckers I didn't even know. That's essentially what it comes down to, okay? I would make stupid-ass jokes, stupid-ass conversation, and make really ignorant statements about a group of people I had never met.
I mean, if you don't want furries, they need to stop drawing sexy cartoons.
Yes, that's true.
Whenever Bugs Bunny put on a dress, I couldn't help but get a little chubby.
There you go.
Whenever he put on a dress, tried to seduce Elmer Fudd.
So I got to talk with her about it, and then I fucking finally understood because I was able to relate it to something about me. And the thing I was able to relate it to something about me is when you're flirting with somebody and you look at them and you're talking to them and something they're saying and you're relating with each other, you're connecting with each other. That's their conversation in that.
Couldn't it also be a way to escape some of the shame associated with sex? Because a lot of people feel kind of shameful.
Yeah, but she wanted to be treated like a cat, whether they were having sex or not. It wasn't just a sexual thing for her.
It's like a way to escape the guilt of asking for something.
Yeah, it could be.
Like escape the guilt of pleasure, especially for... I think that because of the way society is, that a lot of women feel, and I'm speaking out of my ass because I'm not a woman, I think a lot of women feel like they're not supposed to enjoy sex, or they feel shameful about it.
Sure.
Maybe that's more so older generation than the younger ones. I think that a lot of younger women are more open about their sexuality and stuff. But I think that there's a sense for a lot of women where they feel like, and some guys too, they feel kind of ashamed.
Yes.
They feel like they can't, like it's dirty. So by doing the furry thing or by introducing something else, it's almost like putting on a mask or a costume.
Right.
And you're removing yourself from the equation.
Yeah.
It's like people who have...
like the pony play idea.
Yeah, or certain people who have certain...
different fetishes.
Type of... Yeah, or like somebody who likes to do role play.
Yeah.
You're kind of taking yourself out of it and playing a character instead.
Right. It's not you being...
So I'm not allowed to want
something or other.
Let's say I enjoy to be pegged.
Yeah.
But I'm not allowed to enjoy being pegged because I find it shameful or I find it embarrassing. But if I'm playing a character and I'm role playing, now it's okay because I'm removing that shame.
Yeah. So if you dress up like a lady elf, it's more okay.
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah. And I don't mean to single out.
I could be wrong. That's just my theory.
No. I agree with you. Granted, I'm also not a woman. Yet.
Well, I'm saying it also applied to dudes who are, because I used to be very...
it applies to both.
I used to be very sexually conservative when I was younger.
Yeah.
Probably still am a little
Actually,
bit.
I think the most current two generations are far more, and excuse my old language, I am the old man, are far more prudish now than
Yeah.
previous generations. Not
Yeah.
not like your grandmas, but like more prudish than Gen X. I'll say it that way because I know my gen pretty well. I would say the newer ones are far more skittish or prudish towards sex and flirting and intimacy than Gen X.
I think that's a
so.
whole
I could be wrong.
Conversation for another day. Sounds like a can
really
of worms.
is. I would really love to get into that because I really think it's true. And that's because of the experience we have with a couple of human beings who have, hung out in and around our improv group. I think, man, that's why I kind of think Gen X is kind of a unique, excuse the language, but a unique unicorn when it comes to like fucking generations, man. Because like we're more outright and forthright and blunt about the way we talk and what we're talking about. And we believe things should be out there in the open to talk about and to experience. And it seems like the generations prior to and the generations afterward. Getting back to your topic, I think Gen X is also far more skeptical and cynical than generations prior and generations after.
What can be kind of annoying sometimes is, the essential oils Karen, who like, yes, Karen, medical science is wrong, but you're right. You and your peppermint oils, not the guy who went to med school for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like that's what I find annoying. It's like that taps into the thing like with the whole the boxer thing that I was talking about earlier. It's like, yes, you're right, and all these other people are wrong. Medical science is wrong. You who has no medical education whatsoever somehow knows better.
Yes.
Just like the people who are the anti-vax and the essential oil people who somehow think they know better than medical science. Now, is big pharma something that we should be concerned about?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
I think that any large corporations, I think the military industrial complex is something to worry about.
Agreed.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have a healthy level of skepticism. It's just that a lot of times there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that points in a certain direction, and people will still find some way to say it's all bullshit.
Right.
When you have no clue what the fuck you're talking about.
But they also have tendency to say that if you question it in any way, shape, or form, that you automatically are against. Like you just said, the military-industrial complex. Now, me and you were pretty similar in this idea. We're not a big fan of with how much money and how it is utilized, but by no means are we against the military.
No,
especially because I am a veteran.
It has
and
to do
I am
with
not against the men and women who serve this country.
It has to do with the contracts.
Yes.
With the companies that produce all of the like the jets, the tanks, the all the stuff that the military uses, and they have contracts where they basically only buy OEM parts for all of these things from them. And you worked on tanks.
I did.
They'll charge the military like $800 for a fucking screw that goes in a tank because they're taking advantage of those exclusive contracts, and the people who get hurt are the taxpayers because the people in the who work in the government don't give a fuck. It's not their money.
I'm going to give an example of this, and this is a minor example. And if you served in the military and you were a tank mechanic and you did not have this experience, I don't give a fuck. I was once told by somebody in the motor pool, and I'm not going to say what rank they were. I'm not going to say who it was. They literally said, take the line unit out, throw it away and get a new one because we can always afford to get a new one, opposed to cracking it open and actually fucking fixing it. In fact, I was told we are never supposed to open it up and fix it. We're just supposed to throw it away and get a new one. Not necessarily throw it away, but like put it somewhere else and put in a new one, right? And that costs a fuck ton of money to constantly be replacing these units all the time. But anyway, that was my experience. If you didn't have that, whatever. I'm not going to justify.
Yeah, I mean,
myself.
we know that there's
horrible waste in the military.
A lot of it's publicly visible information. Go and look up like how much money different components cost that they're.
Yeah. I will say that you have to push a lot. You have to like fucking hug the ground a fuck ton if you lose a quarter inch fucking.
But it's not.
wrench.
It's not just the amount of money they're spending on weapons and equipment. It's also the financial incentive to get involved in conflict around the world because of the contracts they have. So, yes, I think you should have certain level of skepticism about like, do these people actually have our best interests in mind, or are they concerned about the interest of the companies that are making billions and billions of dollars.
So I'm going to jump to pharmaceuticals real quick. People like to shit on, big pharma a lot. And I will say that there are tons and tons of people who have survived horrible shit, who have been cured of horrible shit, who are continuing to be able to live and or thrive with horrible shit because that pharmaceutical big pharma conglomerate there of, money hungry assholes exists. Now, do I believe that we could still R&D and get medications out to people in a different way and not have money hungry assholes? Yes,
actually,
I do.
one of the things that
but because
this is funny because I brought up Trump earlier.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I believe one of the things that Trump wants to push for in Congress if he gets back in is a law to create an exception for people to try experimental drugs. So like if you're dying of something,
allow you to actually try something that might kill you?
Like that's not FDA approved yet.
Right.
So if you don't give a shit if it kills you, you're just like, well, I'll let me just try it anyway.
So I wasn't going to vote for him, and I'm probably still not going to vote for him. But on that one issue right the fuck there, if I had to choose who to vote for president just based on that one singular talking point you just said, I would vote for him. And here's why. If you are willing in your last month, in your last 6 months, in your last 2 years, for Christ's sake, if you're willing to go through a procedure to help others after you not have to go through that, bravo on you, and you should be allowed to do it.
Yeah. I mean, because it's giving them data too.
Yeah. Like if you want to be a fentanyl addict in your last 30 days on Earth, just because I think you don't want to feel the pain, I think you should be allowed to.
I think that there needs to be some level of restriction on it. Like you have to
get
some
actually
paperwork
be
signed.
Come on. No, not just consent, because somebody could talk somebody who's not going to die.
No, I'm saying your doctor should have to like jump, not the onus on the patient. The onus should be on the doctor who's doing it. The doctor should have to, or the hospital, whoever's prescribing it.
Prove this person's going to die?
No, they should have to. There should be some hoop to jump through, because I don't think you want to just be handing out experimental drugs to everybody.
No. I think there should be some. I think you're right. The doctor should have to give a justification somehow of why this person should be allowed.
Yeah.
Right. And it should be like, we can't fix this. Right. Although I will say this, if you have dementia and Alzheimer's, like I don't think that person should be able to have consent to do that, like an experiment like that or whatnot. And I don't think your family members should be allowed to give consent for that either, because you're not able to understand it potentially.
I was watching, I don't remember what it was. I was watching something. I was watching some video where they were either reacting or sharing their thoughts on a speech that Trump gave. And I think that was one of the things he brought up in one of his speeches was he wants to push for that. Okay. But I think one of the things because we have to wrap up. But one of the things that I also find annoying is, I think I mentioned this in the episode, I might be repeating myself, is that everybody has these like delusional expectations of the executive office.
Oh God, they do.
Like the president can't do all these things. Like the president can't write law. The president can sign a law, but they can't write law, and they don't pass laws. It has to pass through Congress first, and then it goes to the president to sign off or veto it.
Yeah. And even if he vetoes it, all that means is that it goes back to Congress to be re-voted on.
And so like, even if Trump got back in and he wanted to do this particular thing, he can't, like, he can tell Congress, hey, I think this is a good idea, but it's still up to Congress to
he
draft.
can't even propose the motherfucker.
That's what I'm saying. It's just annoying. Like, people don't understand they don't understand some of the basic ways that our government works, like basic civics. And I'm not saying I'm an expert by any means, but like I at least have some general understanding of how things work.
Yeah, I'm going to say I probably know more than most people do about how our government is supposed to work.
But
I'm going to say that with pretty good confidence.
If anybody's listening and you are a Trump supporter, I would look up some videos about January 6th and look up the Eastman memo. And
what are you trying to get them not to be Trump supporters?
No, I'm just saying that they should have that information. You should know that there's documented proof that Trump had a plan to try to overthrow the democratic process. And part of that was using a false slates of electors from different states that were not certified by the states.
Yeah, I actually only learned that happened like a week ago.
So states, if you don't know, I don't really want to get super into this.
Yeah. Let's.
But if you know how our presidential elections, like you don't actually vote for the president, right?
Mm-hmm.
You vote for who you want, and then your state has a slate of electors who actually send in the electoral votes.
And ideally, if majority of people in a state vote for X, those electorates,
Right. You're not actually voting for the
put their
president.
vote to it.
Right. You vote the popular vote.
Yep.
But it's actually the electors who send the electoral votes to.
Right.
But the way the electorate works is the state picks their electorate.
Yes.
What Trump was doing is he was saying, no, those don't count. And he had his own, and he was trying to get Mike Pence to certify his electors, which weren't even legal in the states that he was doing this in, for like states that were close or swing states. And part of that plan also included riling people up on the day that they were supposed to be counted to put pressure.
Right. On Mike Pence.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't understand this. And it's something that I didn't really look too much into until recently.
You know, I had a buddy actually say, for some of that stuff, not all of it, but for some of that stuff, they actually said, and even if he did do it, it doesn't matter. He'll be a much better president.
So you want to have a guy in office who tried to overthrow the democratic process, who apparently doesn't care about our democratic system of government, who just thinks that if he thinks that it was stolen or he thinks things are wrong, that he can just say fuck it.
Well, they think he'll do a better job than
the other argument I've heard
Vice
is
President Harris.
The other argument I've heard, which is dumb, is that, well, it didn't work, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Hey, he tried to coup the government, but it didn't work, so who cares?
Yeah, it only matters if he successfully did it. How come Vice President Harris everybody only wants to refer to her by her first name?
Kamala?
Yeah. I hear more and more commentators, just doing TikTok clips, I hear more and more of them just call her Kamala. Like, it is Vice President Harris.
It's a fun name to say. I don't know.
But it's the same thing with President Biden, right? I hear more people just call him Biden. And then same thing with former President Trump. He was the president of our country, right? Like, whether you like him or dislike him, he is still the former president of the country. Fucking call him former President Trump. Like,
can I just call him an asshole?
You can, but like also put former president asshole on it. I mean, put some level of respect. He still was the president of the United States.
I've tried to dance around and skirt politics a lot on the show, but I think I think I've decided that I'm just going to be more open about my opinions.
I want an entire, so I was going to say this off camera, but I'll say it on camera because look forward to it, everybody. In the next couple of weeks, if not in the next month, I want to do an entire episode about the election. I don't want to educate. I want to talk our personal viewpoints and who we're going to vote for.
And I am much more, I stay much more current on political stuff than Nick does. So like I'm constantly, I watch videos and I read stuff constantly about,
and I do not
political stuff
at all. In fact, I know nothing about what Vice President Harris would like to do if she is elected president. I have no idea any of it.
I don't think anybody does because she's only been the presumptive candidate for how long now?
A day or two?
No, it's been a little. I'm saying that she's only been the presumptive candidate for what, a few weeks?
At best, yeah.
So
I mean, everybody assumes that she's just going to carry forward the same thing that President Biden.
What I'm saying is, I don't even think she's had time to put together a platform yet.
No,
I heard her give a speech.
Oh, you did?
Where she talked about, but it sounded more like platitudes. It didn't sound like there was much substance.
Wait, is that the one that has that weird quote from it?
No, I don't think so.
There's one that she gave recently, and there's this weird meme quote.
It was a speech in Wisconsin. She's actually giving a speech, I think, this weekend in Massachusetts. She's in Pittsfield.
Oh, that's the other side of the state.
Yeah. But
I used to live near Pittsfield.
But Trump is the same way. If you listen to a lot of his speeches, it's all platitudes. It's not there's no substance. He doesn't really actually talk about like what his plans are.
Oh, except for he wants to finish the wall.
But it's okay to say like I want to do these things, but you don't actually lay out how you're going to do them.
Yeah, which we need to have a real fucking plan because the first time he said he was going to build a wall, and he's
like, I'm going to fix the war in Ukraine, but he doesn't say how.
Right.
I'm going to do these things, but I don't know how.
So I don't want to get too far into this, but that same buddy who's
I'm going to end the war in Israel.
I said that Trump promised us a wall in the former President Trump. Told us he was going to build a wall in his first 4 years, and yet I said he didn't, and my buddy goes, well, he actually was able to build blah, 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 number of miles
And
of
he
a wall.
abused
And it
his
was-
executive power and used the military to build a bunch of the wall.
Yeah, like, come on
I
now.
don't know if that.
He
Were
built
you aware
some
of that?
I was not, no.
So basically, Congress
I
said
don't care.
no.
Yeah.
So he asked Congress to give him funding for a border wall. They
Mhm.
said, "F you, no."
Yeah.
And he said, "F you, I'm going to declare it an emergency." So what he
What?
did is he declared that the border was a national emergency.
Yeah.
That basically, because there's people coming over the border, that it was a threat to national security.
Yeah.
And so he used the military to build the
Mhm.
wall because
So-
that's within executive power
Yeah.
to use
So
the military.
when we get into this episode about politics and jazz, and
Yeah.
more specifically about the election, I want to talk about a couple of things too, because I think all candidates have been missing a really awesome opportunity.
Not
But-
all poo-poo times your pee-pee times, but all pee-pee times your poo-poo times.
But please elect Thanos 2024, because we need a candidate that will actually get some shit done. President Thanos.
I want to vote for Gregory House.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. I will vote for him as well.
Okay.
President House.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if
please.
you're a skeptical asshole, keep that shit on check.
Please like, subscribe, follow, everything you can. Share with a buddy, anything you can on all social media. And please comment if there's something you like, dislike, or whatnot of our episodes. Let us know. Nick is cool with being wrong, and I like to get educated. So let us know. Thank you very much, everybody.
Pee-pee poo-poo.